Moses summons the assembly. He called all Israel, not only the elders, but, it is likely, as many of the people as could come within hearing. v1. The greatest of them were not above God's command, nor the meanest of them below his cognizance, but they were all bound to do. 2. He demands attention. Hear, O Israel, hear and heed, hear and remember, hear, that you may learn and keep and do, else your hearing is to no purpose. When we hear the word of God, we must set ourselves to learn it, that we may have it ready to us upon all occasions, and what we have learned we must put in practice, for that is the end of hearing and learning, not to fill our heads with notions, or our mouths with talk, but to rectify and direct our affections and conversations. 3. He refers them to the covenant made with them in Horeb, as that which they must govern themselves by. See the wonderful condescension of divine grace in turning the command into a covenant, that we might be the more strongly bound to obedience by our own consent and the more encouraged in it by the divine promise, both which are supposed in the covenant. The promises and threatenings annexed to some of the precepts, as to the second, third, and fifth, make them amount to a covenant. The parties to this covenant. God made it, not with our fathers, not with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To them God gave the covenant of circumcision, Acts 7:8, but not that of the 10 Commandments. The light of divine revelation shone gradually, and the children were made to know more of God's mind than their fathers had done. The covenant was made with us, or our immediate parents that represented us, before Mount Sinai, and transacted for us the publication of this covenant. God himself did, as it were, read the articles to them. v4 He talked with you face to face, word to word, so the Chaldee. Not in dark visions, as of old he spoke to the fathers, Job 4:12-13, but openly and clearly, and so that all the thousands of Israel might hear and understand. He spoke to them, and then received the answer they returned to him, thus was it transacted face to face. The mediator of the covenant, Moses, stood between God and them, at the foot of the mount, v5, and carried messages between them both for the settling of the preliminaries, ex 19, and for the changing of the ratifications, ex 24. Herein Moses was a type of Christ, who stands between God and man, to show us the word of the Lord, a blessed day's man, that has laid his hand upon us both, so that we may both hear from God and speak to him without trembling. Here is the repetition of the 10 Commandments, in which observe. Though they had been spoken before, and written, yet they are again rehearsed, for precept must be upon precept, and line upon line, and all little enough to keep the word of God in our minds and to preserve and renew the impressions of it. We have need to have the same things often inculcated upon us. See Philosophy 3:1. There is some variation here from that record, ex 20, as there is between the Lord's Prayer as it is in Mt 6 and as it is Lu 11. In both it is more necessary that we tie ourselves to the things than to the words unalterably. The most considerable variation is in the 4th commandment. In ex 20 the reason annexed is taken from the creation of the world, here it is taken from their deliverance out of Egypt, because that was typical of our redemption by Jesus Christ, in remembrance of which the Christian Sabbath was to be observed. Remember that thou wast a servant, and God brought thee out, v15. It is fit that thy servants should be favored by the Sabbath rest, for thou knowest the heart of a servant, and how welcome one day's ease will be after 6 days' labor. It is fit that thy God should be honored by the Sabbath work, and the religious services of the day, in consideration of the great things he has done for thee. In the resurrection of Christ we were brought into the glorious liberty of the children of God, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, by the gospel addition of the law, we are directed to observe the first day of the week, in remembrance of that glorious work of power and grace. It is added in the 5th commandment, that it may go well with thee, which addition the apostle quotes, and puts first, f6:3, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long. If there be instances of some that have been very dutiful to their parents, and yet have not lived long upon earth, we may reconcile it to the promise by this explication of it, whether they live long or no, it shall go well with them, either in this world or in a better. See Eccle 8:12. The last 5 commandments are connected or coupled together, which they are not in Exodus: neither shalt thou commit adultery, neither shalt thou steal, etc., which intimate that God's commands are all of a piece. The same authority that obliges us to one obliges us to another, and we must not be partial in the law, but have respect to all God's commandments, for he that offends in one point is guilty of all. Jam 2:10, 11. 6. That these commandments were given with a great deal of awful solemnity, v. 22. They were spoken with a great voice out of the fire, and thick darkness. That was a dispensation of terror, designed to make the gospel of grace the more welcome, and to be a specimen of the terrors of the judgment day. PS 50:3, 4. He added no more. What other laws he gave them were sent by Moses, but no more were spoken in the same manner that the 10 commandments were. He added no more, therefore we must not add. The law of the Lord is perfect. He wrote them in 2 tables of stone, that they might be preserved from corruption, and might be transmitted pure and entire to posterity, for whose use they were intended, as well as for the present generation. These being the heads of the covenant, the chest in which the written tables were deposited was called the Ark of the Covenant. See Revelation 11:19.